I love it. Every time I board the train and start work.
It's 6 a.m. in Hanoi, the Vietnamese capital. Time for the daily flag raising on Ba Dinh Square. The national anthem plays, and war veterans attend the ceremony. The protracted war between what was then North and South Vietnam and the subsequent unification of the country are deeply ingrained in the memories of the Vietnamese. It was on this now historic square that revolutionary communist leader Ho Chi Minh proclaimed the independence of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in 1945. This mausoleum honoring the late president overlooks the square, but independence was not fully gained until the founding of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam in 1976, at the end of what is known here as the American War. Further east, at the heart of Hanoi's Old Town, is Hoan Kiem Lake. Nearly 50 years after the war ended, a lot of people have a positive outlook on the future. Transportation infrastructure is struggling to keep pace with the country's rapid development, including both roads and railways. Being a crossing guard is an increasingly dangerous profession. Nguyen Thanh Long has overseen this crossing for 12 years. He works 12-hour shifts in a job with a lot of responsibility.
When you work here, it becomes your life. In Vietnam, we say, you have to carry your fate with you. I was almost 30 when I started working here, and I'd had a range of different jobs before that. Working here is my fate.
Long's mother was similarly destined to work for the railways. The highly confined surroundings mean the trains rattling through inevitably dictate the rhythm of locals' lives. Including Nguyen Thanh Hoang's, she was a crossing guard here herself for over 3 decades and has been living here just as long.
I thought it would be a good idea with my job to use the plot of land and build a house for us here. The railway had no objections, and we're still here today. My oldest son has also been living here for years.
Once his shift is over, Long takes his birds and walks the short distance along the tracks back home. It's now time for lunch with his wife, his children, and his mother. After sundown, there's a heartier range of food available in Hanoi's Old Town. Vietnamese cuisine is extremely varied, especially here on Ta Hai Yin Street. Also known as Beer Street, it's a hotspot among Hanoi's evening revelers. Just to the south is Hoan Kiem Lake. This song is about taking the train home. Because not far from the lake is Hanoi's main railway station. The ticket counter is in the main waiting hall. Train travel in Vietnam is straightforward. We have tickets for the SE1 at 10:15, the Saigon Express number 1.
Kính thưa quý khách, nhà ga xin mời quý khách có vé tàu SE1 vào ga lên đoàn tàu đỗ trên đường sắt số 1.
Vietnam's rail network was built during the French colonial period and has played a prominent role in the country's history. Recounted to us by Tran Van Ban.
SE1 train tickets are asked to come to the station.
He's a frequent traveler on this train. The railways are an important symbol for the 79-year-old war veteran. Our train departs on time. Our journey will take us from north to south in this thin coastal country and will last over 32 hours. Our route will take us right past the South China Sea. Our journey will cross almost the entire length of Vietnam, around 1,700 kilometers, from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, previously known as Saigon. But our train will first take us past a rather special kind of attraction. Dong Tao, or Railway Street, where Nguyen Hoan Thuy Linh runs one of the many cafes lining the train tracks. Restaurants here used to use waiters who would hop across the tracks to serve customers. A perilous practice that is now prohibited.
There are fewer trains now. They used to come almost every hour. The schedule dictates my life and my child. She's been seeing the trains pass by for 8 years, and there's no danger now. The tourists are safe too, because the cafe owners are responsible for them.
Thrill-seeking tourists are good business for Linh. The North-South line was built to be the backbone of the country, which, as our train driver, Nguyen Quyen Quy knows, also led to its repeated destruction. The route was again complete 1 year after the reunification of Vietnam.
Since the liberation of South Vietnam and the reunification of the country, trains have resumed from Hanoi to Saigon and brought citizens from both parts of the country closer together. With each Reunification Express, we bring people from the north to the south and vice versa.
It's a train that is a symbol and physical manifestation of the country's reunification. a train of national reconciliation, of a people once bitterly divided. Half a century later, it's a scenario that's hard to imagine. The train is a comfortable ride for nighttime travelers. And it's quiet enough for us to visit Tran Van Ban in his compartment. He joined the communist Viet Cong forces based in the north of the country in 1967.
My family received 4 notifications of my death. In 1968, 1970, 1972, and 1974. Not just one, but 4 times. You can imagine it was a huge surprise for my family when I came home. I'd been declared dead 4 times and still came back alive.
Bon's mother had even built an altar for her son. It stood at her home for 8 years until Bon returned home in 1976. He removed the altar himself. Bon has since devoted his life to searching for the remains of fallen soldiers. The next morning, we visit the Van Long Nature Reserve near Ninh Binh. Where we join Thilo Nadler. The German biologist came to Vietnam in the early 1990s and has since dedicated his life to the conservation of rare primates. He founded the first wildlife sanctuary of its kind in the Indochina region in 1993. The sanctuary gives animals freed from poachers a new home. One of his primary focuses is Delacour's langurs, a critically endangered species of monkey.
Eine der ersten Aktionen, das war
Right at the start, like a gift from God, we were able to seize 2 of these animals from poachers.
Beschlagnahmung vom illegalen Tierhandel.
And the Endangered Primate Rescue Center was born. Thilo was its director for 25 years. He and the local conservationists played a big part in ensuring that primates like the Delacour's langurs have survived into the new millennium. The aim is for the animals to one day be returned to the wild. We accompany Thilo as he makes his way to the Giang An, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and to an island where the now 82-year-old once released a number of the monkeys. The langurs with white pants, as they're also called, have seen their numbers rise back up to around 200.
Das Ziel ist natürlich eine.
Our aim is, of course, to build up a viable population. But that kind of thing is going to take several decades. A viable population means between 500 and 1,000 animals. And it takes a lot of time for a population of that size to build up.
Back aboard the Reunification Express, a new day dawns, and it's breakfast time. Passengers are served in their seats. Coffee and the traditional morning soup. almost 80% of the strategically important railway line was destroyed during the Vietnam War. Of the 1,300 or so bridges, an estimated 1,000 were reduced to ruins. Although for Tran Van Ban, the loss of soldiers' lives was far worse.
Cái người lính lại chặn đã xác định cái hy sinh và đào cái đường chuộc.
We knew that a lot of us would end up dead. We dug graves for ourselves.
Trước lúc ra đã chặn đấy.
Before each battle, we'd gather together and promise that after the liberation, the survivors would bring the bodies of the men who died back to their mothers.
Sẽ trở về, mang xác tao về cho mẹ.
Ban took his first ever trip on the train in 1978. He dug up the remains of 34 comrades and delivered their death certificates to their families in person. The fighting was especially fierce in the province of Quang Tri. The 17th parallel roughly coincided with the border that had been drawn up between North and South Vietnam after the departure of French colonial forces in 1954. The area would later be witness to some of the bloodiest battles of the war, with memorials now honoring the casualties, such as this one in what was then North Vietnam. We follow Ban on this bridge across the Hien Long River until 1975, part of the border between North Vietnam and the US-backed South. This monument commemorates the separation of families. Ban says the bridge is a reconstruction of the original, which was destroyed by an American airstrike in 1972. He has long forgotten the border. He is originally from the North, but married a woman from the South, where he now lives. And his search for the remains of fallen soldiers continues to this day, regardless of who they fought for.
Thì hôm nay tôi lại được trở về đây để nhìn lại cái
Today I crossed this bridge not as a soldier, but while thinking about the reconstruction of our country and how to heal the wounds caused by the war.
Ở trên cái cầu này để nghĩ về một cái đất nước của chúng tôi hiện nay.
Ban has commuted between the North and South of Vietnam over 40 times on the Reunification Express. Our journey progresses further south, past the farms and fields that dominate the country's landscape. About 700 kilometers later, we arrive in Hue.
Quý khách trong sân ga lưu ý, đoàn tàu SE1 đang vào ga trên đường sắt số 1. Quý khách có vé đi tàu, chờ cho đoàn tàu sửa bánh và lên tàu.
Hue was the capital of Vietnam during the Nguyen Dynasty from 1802 to 1945. One physical legacy of the period is the citadel, the palatial residence of the royal family. Court etiquette and ceremonial customs, such as music and dance, were very important to the emperors. We are granted backstage access to the Royal Ballet of Hue. The dancers are preparing for a performance. Vietnamese court music dates back to the 13th century, but it was during the later Nguyen Dynasty that it reached its pinnacle, with the music serving to demonstrate the emperor's power and longevity. One frequently performed dance is the Luk Khong Hoa Dang.
Lukung Huadang is based on Buddhist traditions. It centers on the custom of praying 6 times, with each prayer accompanied by a symbolic offering to Buddha: incense, flowers, tea, fruit, food, and lanterns. The dance was later expanded and would often be performed to mark the birthday of the emperor's mother.
And in this orchestra, the drum plays a pivotal part. Court music was seen as an expression of reverence towards emperors and gods alike. Dances like this one are now also performed at festivals. In 2003, Vietnamese court music was recognized by UNESCO as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Hue lies on the Huang Kachan, or Perfume River. And right next door is the Dong Ba Market. The market opened in 1899, and the countless stalls here, mostly run by women, hawk all sorts of food. Some as fresh as they come. The market attracts 7,000 visitors daily, many of them on mopeds. It's now time for us to return to the railway station, which also has a spacious waiting room. Shortly before departure, the doors to the platform open. Tickets are digital. Lunchtime is now approaching. Nguyen Quang Hy is happy to be filmed while he cooks. He's been serving passengers on the Reunification Express for 10 years. His hobby? Traveling, of course. He is content with his job.
The work isn't terribly hard. I cook for an average of 100 to 120 people a day. The job earns me enough to support my family.
The meals are freshly prepared and delivered to passenger compartments. Conductor Mai Vu Tang is serving. He also sees the Reunification Express as symbolic.
I've been working for the railroad for 17 years now. Working on the Reunification Express is really interesting because you get to meet people and see a lot of different places. Compared to other jobs, it's a real pleasure to work here.
Dam Cao Hai in central Vietnam is the next highlight. At 70 meters long, it's the largest freshwater lagoon in Southeast Asia. The majority of people in Vietnam do not adhere to one belief system. They tend to follow one or several folk religions or an amalgamation of classical faiths. Today, we will see the topping out ceremony for this house of faith, with construction work basically complete.
What else?
The ceremony is conducted by a monk. The ground floor will host a cafe, while the stories higher up are still being finished.
Đây là một cái phong tục của người dân Việt Nam mình.
It's Vietnamese custom to celebrate a new building being constructed. The prayers are for our ancestors. The ceremony is to bring good luck to the owner, to drive away evil and protect against unemployment. It's a really old Vietnamese custom.
Tưởng dĩ hỡi ấm linh đạo lai vân tập, hỡi ấm linh đạo lai vân tập.
Distributing money is also part of the ceremony.
Nhập tâm câu nguyện đại tình dị kim ngân binh y quang đợi hai lạc các hàng trường bằng.
Before the earthly wealth is consigned to a fire, an offering to those in the afterlife. The most spectacular section of our journey aboard the Reunification Express is now beginning. The train passes beneath the Deo Hai Van, the ocean cloud pass. Trains have to set off from Hanoi at night to allow passengers to appreciate this stretch during daylight. Many passengers take the train just because of the breathtaking views.
Going by train is safer and cheaper than by car. Plus, I wanted to see the scenery at the Cloud Pass.
Em cũng muốn được ngắm cảnh Đèo Hải Vân.
The Zhuang Mountains constitute a kind of meteorological border between North and South Vietnam. A top tourist destination and paradise for bikers. The Ocean Cloud Pass rises almost 500 meters from sea level. We reach our next stop a few kilometers from the top of the pass. Da Nang is a terminus station, so the engine has to be coupled onto the other end of the train. Which gives us a brief opportunity to look around the coastal city with a population of around 1 million. Da Nang is famed for its beaches. The first US combat troops landed nearby during the Vietnam War. The Americans set up a vital airbase in Da Nang, which subsequently grew to become one of the biggest cities in South Vietnam. A few kilometers further south, we visit Hoi An. The old town enjoyed the rare fate of not being destroyed during the Vietnam War, and today boasts UNESCO World Heritage status. Before our train journey continues, we've arranged to meet someone outside town. Out on the Tu Bon River, Vu Leu tries to attract fish by hitting an oar against his boat. He's always lived here and has mastered the art of coaxing his prey towards his round basket boat.
Mà đã rồi biết tới chừ là chú đã biết làm nghề là hồi là 9 tuổi mới tới chừ đây.
I was 9 when I learned how to swim, and I've been working on the water ever since. I've never done anything else. I go out in this round boat, and every day I manage to catch a few kilos of fish.
Today is unfortunately an exception for the 62-year-old. Perhaps tomorrow's haul will be better. We then return to the station in Da Nang. The Reunification Express sets off once again in the afternoon. Since the narrow tracks were built by the French, the train is often called the TGV, after the famous high-speed French train. Around a quarter of the 1,300 bridges are in need of renovation. Night descends early and swiftly in Vietnam. We now get ready for our second night aboard the train. Passengers used to be able to take a little detour here up to Dalat. At an altitude of almost 1,500 meters, this delightful little station was built by the French in 1938 with touches of Art Deco style. The railway was attacked by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. The route was discontinued in 1968. A short tourist service was later introduced, featuring this steam locomotive. We meet Nguyen Duc Thuc behind the station. He was a driver during the war. Decades later, in the early 1990s, he drove the cog railway train and remained at the controls right up to its end.
Tôi là người lái đầu máy hơi nước cuối cùng của ngành đường sắt Việt Nam.
I was the last steam engine driver for the old railway. I was really sad when I had to stop in 2016. This locomotive was my place of work, and I have very fond memories of it. It feels like an old friend. I really miss it.
The temperate climate was one reason why the French founded the town of Dalat, building a range of hotels and other buildings. The railway reached Dalat in 1932, which was eventually dubbed Little Paris. The city is now home to over 200,000 people. We then take a different kind of trip with the Easy Riders Motorcycle Club. Its members have been hitting the road together in the area around Dalat for over a quarter of a century. Their itinerary includes multi-day tours and day trips. But the club was not originally founded for the sheer joy of motorcycling. It was more out of necessity, with members turning a hobby into an occupation, as 73-year-old Hong explains.
Và những thành phần đứng tuổi á, tức là sau năm 1975.
After reunification, older people had difficulty finding a job.
Bắt đầu đón tiếp những người khách nước ngoài.
And we started showing foreign visitors around the area.
Rồi những người
English wasn't commonly spoken back then, but a lot of our members could.
cho nên
They were teachers, professors, or army officers.
có học thức giống như là giáo viên, giáo sư hay là thậm chí cả những cái sĩ quan của chế độ cũ nữa.
After a short ride, they show us a popular local attraction. The area around Dalat is known for its waterfalls, and we visit one in Nam Ban. It's named after a supposedly elephant-like rock at the water's edge, although we were unable to spot it. 30 meters high, it's one of the most frequently visited waterfalls in the area. We are now back on board the Reunification Express for the final leg of our journey in the early hours. Just a few kilometers to go until we reach Ho Chi Minh City, our second morning on the train. Nguyen Thi Hai is old enough to remember when it wasn't possible to take the train from north to south.
It's great to see our country unified. Whenever I take this train now, I no longer notice any differences between the north and south. That's why I love riding on this train.
It's 6:30 a.m. as we pull into Ho Chi Minh City Station. The Reunification Express arrives just 20 minutes behind schedule, despite having traveled 1,700 kilometers. The train is not only a symbol of the country's unity, it's also brought people from the two once hostile parts of the country a little bit closer, while making a small contribution to the reconciliation of North and South Vietnam. The Saigon sign still adorns the station. People haven't necessarily gotten used to the new name, Ho Chi Minh City. The central post office and its barrel-vaulted main hall are yet another reminder of the French colonial period. A portrait of the communist leader Ho Chi Minh towers over the hall. Saigon was renamed after him in 1976, following the defeat of South Vietnam. Amid the hustle and bustle of Vietnam's biggest city, with 9 million inhabitants, people often seek refuge from the daily grind by visiting a pagoda. We get to accompany Nguyen Thi Hai as she goes inside the Bat Yen Hao Pagoda. She lights incense to mark the start of her visit. After prayers, the 47-year-old buys a piece of paper where she writes down her name and her wishes. She then hands over the note, which is hung up on a spiral ornament, confident that her prayers will be answered. All of this is part of the ceremony in which prayers do not just focus on the well-being of the individual and their loved ones.
Everyone in my family is healthy, but I still go to the pagoda to pray for a peaceful life and for career success. I have a couple of side jobs in addition to my main profession, and I want them all to go well. And I want my children to do well at school. I just pray for everything to be all right.
After the ceremony, He-yin buys some songbirds, which she'll release again shortly afterwards. Another ritual that's part of visiting a pagoda. Setting the birds free is an offering and is supposed to create positive thoughts. The liberation of the animals is also meant to generate good karma. An endearing custom to round off our enlightening journey across Vietnam.